Hi everybody, this is Refresh, and today I'm going to be talking about the M19 draft that I went to. M19 is the 2019 core set, and I went to a Friday night Magic draft for this set. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about what happened, what I drafted, the deck that I built, and the games that I played. And so this is everything that I drafted. Interestingly enough, you'll see no basic lands because basic lands are part of the draft in this set, and apparently people took basic lands instead of actual cards. As you can see, I am heavily green and black. My first pick was a Vivian's Invocation. The first pack wasn't that great, and so I thought Vivian's Invocation wasn't too bad. Somehow I managed to draft 6 rares. They all got past me. I wasn't like rare drafting, but people were giving me rares in color, and so I thought, why not take them? So I got a Palaka Worm, a Vivian's Invocation, a Prodigious Growth, an Open the Graves, a Runic Armasaur, and a Mentor of the Meek, all within the 3 colors that I was playing. And so I thought it was originally gonna go green-white because I managed to get both a Prodigious Growth and a Knightly Valor, as well as a bunch of creatures to put the auras on, as well as a Satyr Enchanter. But then I started getting past black removal in the Strangling Spores and the Lich's Caress, and I eventually decided that as the white dried up, I thought it'd be better just to go green-black. Part of that was because good white cards are drying up, and the other part was because, when you get this much removal, it's hard to ignore it, and the best white cards that I got were Mentor of the Meek and Angel of the Dawn. And those are both good, but I wasn't getting enough support to consistently play it, especially with low white drops, and so Golgari was the eventual pick generally. And so this is everything I drafted. As you can see, I took some Naturalized and Plummets high just as good sideboard material, and so let me show you the deck that I built. This is the final deck that I built. It's kind of a ramp deck. I have some late game payoffs in Colossal Dreadmaw, Prodigious Growth, Palaka Worm, Vivian's Invocation. The reason why I kept the Manolith is to help me get up there, but also I decided to splash white for the 2 Luminous Bonds that I picked up. And the Manolith plus a Tranquil Expanse plus 1 Plains will help me get there. Other than that, I didn't really see the need for too much in the way of 2-drops. I kept these just to keep the board gummed up for the early game if I need them, and also even Greenwood Sentinel is fine when you stick a Prodigious Growth on it. And then the Druid of the Cowl is also one of my rampers with Manolith to help me get up to casting some of these big guys. Other than that, I have a bunch of 3-drops to help hold the ground. The Rejuvenator is also ramp. The Sentinel, the Runic Armasaur hold the ground. The Bloodletter is a potential way of winning. The Sky Scanner is an additional body that I can put down and just draw a card. And then we have more creatures that'll gum up the ground in Giant Spider, Poison Tip Archer, and Skeleton Archer. Poison Tip Archer is in itself kind of a game-winning condition as well, because as things die, my opponent will lose life. And it's just really hard to deal with, being Reach and Death Touch. And then I have a lot of removal in Luminous Bonds, Strangling Spores, and Lich's Caress. I also decided to play Open the Graves, which I thought was a decent way to perhaps win the long game if it comes down to it. As these lower creatures die, I'll get 2 black zombies to replace them, and then it will take even longer for my opponent to run through. Now I know that it's slow, but because I'm already ramping between the Rejuvenator, the Manolith, and the Druid of the Cowl, there's a chance I'm going to be able to play this early, and so it's not going to be as slow as it might be. Rise from the Grave I have because I have big creatures that would be great to return to the battlefield, as well as being able to steal anything from my opponent, but of course I'll side it out if I find that my opponent doesn't have anything good to steal. And then I also added 1 Plains, 8 Forests, and 7 Swamps to make a total of 17 lands. I didn't feel like I needed 18 because I'm not thick on the 6 and 7 drops, and I also have the Manolith, the Druid of the Cowl, and the Elvish Rejuvenator to help ramp me up to the top end. And so that's the deck that I built, and next I'll talk about the games. Match number 1 was against a fellow Golgari deck that was playing a surprisingly similar build to mine. In the very first game, I got on the play, but unfortunately I got mana screwed. I was stuck at 3 lands for several turns in a row while my opponent was able to build their board, and by the time I was able to start playing my threats, my opponent was able to remove my Giant Spider and just whittle me down very, very slowly with a Skywash Bloodletter, and there was very little I could do to get around it, and I died with my opponent at 30 life from gaining life, and that was the end of it for me. In the second game, I took the play again, but this time the tables were turned, and it was my opponent's turn to be mana screwed. And so I was playing not the most efficiently I was playing, but I still managed to land a lot more threats in my opponent, remove their threats, and by the time I open the graves, I was getting so much value for everything that he killed that there was very little to do. And then once I put Prodigious Growth on one of my zombies and my opponent had no response, I got in for the win, and that was that. In our final game, this was one of our closer games, so I took a mulligan to 6 and my opponent was on the play because I drew a 7-land hand, and that was just not something I felt comfortable keeping. And so we basically just played creatures and attacked and traded back and forth, and eventually I hit a point where I was just drawing lands for I think about 5 turns in a row, and my opponent was able to draw removal spells and creatures, and eventually I was forced to put a Prodigious Growth on one of my creatures and just run in for the attack to force my opponent to lose their poison tip archer so that they wouldn't be able to kill me with it. But it didn't seem to matter because in the end my opponent just went wider than me while I was drawing lands and finished me off, and that was the end of that. I lost the very first game and I was out of contention for the top 8 and prizes. The second match was against a gentleman playing a mono green ramp deck, which was pretty impressive, but I managed to ramp while he went wide, and I played a Colossal Dreadmaw on turn 5 I believe, and then managed to stick a Prodigious Growth on it on turn 6. And from there my opponent was just out of luck because green doesn't have a lot of ways of dealing with enchanted giant creatures. Now he had naturalizes somewhere in his deck, but he wasn't able to naturalize my Colossal Dreadmaw and lost in, I think, 2 turns. In our second game, each of us kept a 1-lander, him with a bunch of 2-drops and me with the Druid of Cowl. I drew my second land and he didn't, and then I proceeded just to run him over by going bigger and faster than he did, and there was little he could do. By the time he drew the second land, he was playing 2-drops but having to chump them, and then at the end I managed to just quickly get in for the win by turning all my guys sideways and finishing him off with a Skeleton Archer for the last point of damage. So my opponent lost basically to Mana Screw, but it could have been me since I kept basically a similar hand. I ended up winning the second match, going 1-1, and then I went to my third game. My third match was against a gentleman who got a bye for his second match, so he was 1-1, and he was fairly new to Magic. He had only been playing for a few weeks, and so there were a lot of misplays. I tried gently to steer him in the right direction and give him the benefit of the doubt in being able to take back weaker plays, but I don't think his deck was built very well. It was a Izzet, blue-red, beats and burn deck, and there were a lot of 1-drops and 2-drops that he would play and that would quickly get outclassed by my bigger creatures, but he kept attacking anyways, even though the attrition would be really bad for him. So he lost the first game because there were a few misplays on his part, and I just took advantage of it by steamrolling him with big creatures. In the second match, it was pretty much the same thing. My opponent was again playing little guys and getting in for the attack with them while I was just building my board, being a little bit more patient, and then playing bigger guys and playing unfavorable blocks so that I would win the board advantage situation, and then running him over with bigger, larger creatures. And with that, I went 2-1. That wasn't enough to win any prizes in the end. However, the store that I go to, Emerald Knights, has random giveaways of promo cards as well as at certain player accounts, and we had a lot turn out for Friday Night Magic. So there were random gift cards given away as well as promos, and I managed to get one of the random promos. So I picked a Murder, which was a pretty cool little pickup. All in all, let me know what you thought of the draft and the deck that I built, and let me know what your experiences with the core set draft was. How do you feel about the format? I felt like it was a little bit slower than I anticipated, and being able to ramp into big crazy things is fun enough. I mean, I usually expect core sets to be a little bit of a bland experience, and to some extent it wasn't exactly the most mechanically interesting set, but you know, a few drafts here and there with a set like this should be perfectly fine. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe if you'd like to see more such videos. This was Refresh, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.